and in this video I'm going to show you my build for the Nightblade in Elder Scrolls Online. I'm currently in Reaper's March here, just kind of running around, and so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for my Nightblade build, I'm going to be going Dual Daggers, and I'm going to be using mostly skills that are in the Assassination tree and in the Shadow tree. I do have a couple things in the Siphoning tree when I was leveling up, but I switched out of those later on. So the main thing that I did here is I have two weapon sets. I have my primary and my secondary. And while I'm in my primary weapon set, I have mostly assassination skills. And so I have Ambush, I have Mirage, I have Reaper's Mark, and I have Merciless Resolve. And the main reason that I have all these assassination skills is that there is a passive skill called Pressure Points, and it increases your critical strike and your spell critical for every assassination ability you have slotted. So my current bonus is 1,621. And that's because I have 5 assassination skills with the ultimate, which I use Soul Harvest. And the only one I'm not using as an assassination skill is Whirlwind. And so basically what this allows you to do is you have your Ambush, which allows you to basically teleport to an enemy and attack them. And it grants me Empower, which increases my damage on the next attack by 20%. And it also immobilizes the enemy characters that I hit from that ambush attack. So normally what I would do is I would activate my Merciless Resolve and my Reaper's Mark. So you use Reaper's Mark to reduce the physical resistance and spell resistance of the enemy. And then with the upgrade I chose, when the enemy dies, I get 60% of my max health back after killing them, and I get Major Berserk for 5 seconds, which increases my damage further. So this first weapon set is all about increasing your critical damage and increasing your just flat damage. So your critical strikes will be pretty strong, and you're using dual daggers, so you'll have that high base crit chance, and then you'll also get a lot of bonuses from flat damage. And then with the Reaper's Mark as well, you're using the Major Fracture on them, which reduces their physical resistance by over 4,000 for 20 seconds. So there's that. And so normally you would do like a Reaper's Mark on the main target you're going to attack, and then you would ambush in and hit them and immobilize them, and then you would start to go into something like Merciless Resolve. If it's just one guy, you go into Merciless Resolve, which lets you build up momentum for 4 light or heavy attacks. And then after you do those 4 attacks, you get a Spectral Bow, which you can then fire for some good magic damage. And it also reduces enemy speed as well. And that's nice if they try to run or anything else like that. And it also grants a Minor Berserk, which gives 8% more damage. So the Reaper's Mark gives you the Major Berserk, and then you also get Minor Berserk, and both of these stack. If you had 2 skills that both had Major Berserk on them, they would not stack. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that I chose certain upgrades, is I did not want to have things that would conflict. And if you jump in and there's more than one guy, then that's when you would go into your Whirlwind Spin, and you're just throwing basically daggers in all directions, and this works really well against wounded targets. It does additional damage, and it just does pretty good AoE damage as well. And if you ever need to bail out, so let's say you dive in and you start losing a lot of life and you need to get out of there, well then you turn on your Mirage and you get out of there, because that grants you Major Evasion, Minor Resolve, and Minor Ward. And basically that correlates into dodge, chance of 20%, and it gives you increased physical resistance and increased spell resistance. Finally, we have Soul Harvest, which is a great skill to have on this first weapon set. It ravages the enemy with a spinning attack to deal over 4,000 magic damage, and it increases your damage against that target by 20%. It also does Major Defile, which reduces the effectiveness of their healing. So this works really well because it has a low threshold to be used. It only costs 50 ultimate, so This skill will be toggled quite often if you're in a long fight and you're killing lots of enemies. Then you'll get a lot of ultimate points, and you'll be able to use this Soul Harvest multiple times, which will increase your damage quite a bit with that 20%. So that's the first weapon set. You can see the ones I have here are the ones that are in the weapon set. Let's just very briefly look at my passives that I've chosen. I do not have Master Assassin at the moment. I am only Veteran Rank 3, and I have a lot of passive stuff for crafting that I switched into. I didn't think that this was absolutely necessary because it just gives a little bit of damage when you're stealthed, and I'm not stealthed that often. But I did choose to go with the Executioner passive, and that allows you to restore magicka every time you kill an enemy. This is pretty important because you'll run low on magicka quite often. The majority of your recovery will be put into health recovery and stamina recovery because you're going to need the health recovery for sustainability, and the stamina recovery is pretty much essential if you want to be able to constantly be using all your skills. One of the things I forgot to mention is with my weapon sets, I tried to balance the amount of skills that use stamina and the amount of skills that use magicka. Because if you have all stamina skills, then when you run out of stamina, your weapon slot basically becomes useless. So the first one's stamina, next one's magicka, stamina, magicka, magicka, and then the ultimate. So I have the Executioner just to restore my magicka. And then with the assassination ability slotted here for pressure points, I get that additional crit strike. We talked about that earlier, so I'm going to skip that. And then Hemorrhage is a really good one to get. You have to get this one at the higher levels, but it increases your damage dealt by 10% when you have 2 points, and a successful critical hit gives nearby allies minor savagery, which increases their weapon critical strike. So this is really nice when you're in a group and you're fighting off a lot of people. Because your crit chance is so high, you'll constantly be increasing the crit chance of your fellow teammates, and they'll be doing a lot more damage as well. So the clear for the team will be much better. Okay, so that's the first weapon slot. Let's go to the second weapon slot. As you can see, I switched to a different set of daggers. So for the Shadow tree, I have Bolstering Darkness. Sometimes I like to switch into this. I don't use this very regularly, just because I ended up using Devouring Swarm, which you get from the Vampire tree. So let's just get into what I'm using here. I have Dark Cloak as my first skill, and this cloaks you in the shadows and you're invisible, and then it also removes 4 damage over time effects. There is a different upgrade where you get some kind of increased damage or something like that, but I decided to not use that after I tried it a couple times. This second weapon set is more about survivability. So the first one is all about damage. This is the one you start with, this is the one you go in with, and you try to do all your damage as fast as possible. And if you get in trouble, you pop your Mirage, and then you switch to your second weapon set. And this is where you get your sustain and survivability. I've played on some of the higher veteran level maps with other players in the game, and they seem to die a lot more than I do because I switch over to my secondary set, and I get a lot of sustainability from a lot of leech, and I am able to survive quite long. I'm usually the last one that dies. And Dark Cloak is definitely part of that. When you have damage over time effects on you, such as fire damage, which is much, much better against a vampire, you're going to want to have the Dark Cloak so that if you get set on fire or if you have some kind of poison effect on you, you just pop Dark Cloak and it removes it. Number 2 is actually not a shadow ability, it's a weapon ability, and it is under here. I'll show you. It's under the Dual Wield. It's under Blood Craze. Also, Whirlwind is under there as well, and I got Blinding Fury. So what Blood Craze basically gives you is you slice an enemy with both your weapons, and it causes deep lacerations. It does not do a lot of flat damage initially. It's only about 700 at my level. But if you look, its lacerations deal an additional 3,380 physical damage over 9 seconds. And it heals you for 406 every 2 seconds. of the duration. So you're basically getting 4 times that. You're getting about 1,600 life back every time you hit someone with this. So if you're in trouble, you can Dark Cloak, take off those damage over times, and then you can run around blood crazing different enemies and leech their life and recover your life. For my one main damage skill, I like to use Blinding Fury. And this basically attacks the enemy 6 consecutive times, and it does a flat amount the first 5 times, and the last hit does a lot of damage. So when you're using this skill, you want to make sure that you stay in range for that last hit, because that's where you get most of your damage. And for each hit of this ability, you have a 7% chance of setting the enemy off balance, and that's key. Because when you're in this sort of survival mode, and there's some of those harder enemies, those champions and whatnot, you want to be able to have a chance to set them off balance, because that is a CC, a crowd control effect that is very helpful to you and your team when you're sort of in that panic mode. Another one that I've been using is Malthetic Wreath, and this is really nice if used correctly. And what it says is it shackles an enemy in torment, stunning them for 30 seconds and damaging all nearby enemies when the effect ends for 1,000 magic damage, plus 5% for each second the target was stunned. So basically, you do not want to use this on the main target of the group when you're going in to fight. If you think some of your teammates are going to be attacking certain enemies, you do not want to use it on them. You would like to use this on the mages in the background, specifically fire mages. Usually you'll have, a particular group where you're fighting versus a bunch of people with your allies, and then there'll be fire mages that are on the edges that are shooting fireballs at you, and as a vampire, fire is very, very deadly to you. So this works really well by just shackling one of those fire mages on the perimeter and preventing them from doing damage, and also, when it is triggered, it does return some damage to them and anyone around them. So this works really well with 30 seconds as a duration. That gives you a lot of time to just take one person out of the equation. So I like this quite a bit as also a crowd control. My 5th skill is Invigorating Drain. You consume the enemy's life force and you deal 1,000 magic damage and restore 10% of your missing health every second. When the drain is active, you gain 4 ultimate each second. So this is really nice. It also stuns after the drain is done. You get a 3-second stun on this. This can be really nice for starting an engagement if you're not going to be the one going in immediately. Usually you want to go in with a cloak and pop up behind someone, invigorate and drain them, and build up your ultimate a little bit, as well as maybe recover some life if you need it. And then they're stunned, and then you can throw out a Malthetic Wreath on one of the fire mages, and then you can go and switch over to your weapons set 1, and then go for the big damage. So with this playstyle, you sort of have weapon set 1, which has lots of damage, a little bit of utility, and then weapon set 2 has lots of utility with a little bit of damage. And so you want to swap back and forth between the two depending on the situation. For my the ultimate for weapon set 2, I'm using the Vampire Ultimate Devouring Swarm. This darkens the sky with a cloud of bats around you, and it deals 1,400 magic damage to nearby enemies every second. And you're invisible for the duration. It also siphons about 1,200 health for each affected enemy and gives it to you. So this is really, really good. It costs 158 ultimate points to actually use this, so you won't be using this as much, but if you need to put down some big AoE damage and your whirlwind skill is not cutting it, or maybe you have this ultimate, you have 158 ultimate points before you go into the fight, then you can just charge in and just get in the middle, get a big aggro around you, and get their attention, do a couple whirlwinds, and then pop this Devouring Swarm and just AoE everything around you, and heal back up, and then switch back over to whatever you want. So this is just a really good skill to have. You get this through the Vampire skill set. So you need to actually get turned into a vampire at some point with this build, and I would recommend that they say you want to get it as soon as possible to level up your vampire skill sets, you know, because you need to actually use the skills to level them. But I didn't find it very difficult to do that because I was doing my daily dungeons, and I was, you know, doing all the dailies and also questing and whatnot. So I didn't really find it a problem to level my vampire in a short period of time. But I would recommend that you probably get the vampire skill tree no later than probably level 40. Probably around level 30, at the earliest level 20, 25 you would want to get it. But I would think around level 30 would probably be ideal because you've already leveled up, you've already got some gear, you've moved through the content, and now you want to actually start leveling up your vampire skills so that when you get to your dailies, you have these skills available to you. Okay, so let's go back